Coming up in This Week in Computer Hardware, AMD's Threadripper is a 32-thread monster. Google I/O, 4K Fire TVs, $50 Fire tablets, 10-terabyte Western Digital Reds, OpenCL and Vulkan become one, and so much more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 415, recorded May 18th, 2017. AMD's epic Threadripper is headed to the VEGA frontier. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most engaging, and most, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Heron-filled commentary on the joys of monitors and hardware. That's Robert Heron. But joining us this week is not Robert Heron, it's Alan Malventano for PC Per, the storage editor, the senior storage editor. Or are you
we only have,
merely the senior
I'm
editor?
it, man. I'm it.
I'm
it. Just, yeah, it's just, yeah. Some websites have like client and enterprise, 2 separate guys, or maybe even 3 guys. No. It's all me. Sometimes, unfortunately.
Oh, man, don't be that way. Ryan is, I believe, at one of the Disney empires right now, probably contemplating how much fun it is to stand in a line and pay $22 for a beer. So Alan's agreed to join us. And apparently, my beloved Ryzen 1800X is not a high-end desktop CPU. Because one of the things that leaked and then became an official story this week, Sebastian's got the write-up on PCPer.com, is that AMD is going to be releasing the Ryzen Threadripper CPUs, which will feature up to 16 cores and 32 threads. Very little information coming out on those, other than they will be available in summer 2017. WCCF Tech kind of broke the story initially, but they're talking about quad-channel memory support, 44 PCI Express lanes. So if you are a completely unhinged video editor, you're probably at this point drooling, contemplating the whole, like, 16 cores, 32 threads, 44 PCI Express lanes, and all of the memory. It's going to be using apparently the same package, the EPYC package, the Naples EPYC package, 4,094 pins. So this is probably not going to be priced as friendly to the consumer pocketbook as the Ryzen CPUs, the 1800X, for example, or the Ryzen 5 CPUs, but
it's definitely high end.
155 watt TDP on the full Zoot Ryzen 9 1998X CPU. That's the top of the line, 16 cores, 32 threads, 3.5 gigahertz, 3.9 boost clock speed, 155 watts. This feels so Core i7-920 in terms of the TDP on that one. But this is basically similar to
still
Intel's
16 cores,
X99
man.
parts.
16 cores for that TDP.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I'm
if
down
you think
with
about it that way.
I sit corrected, sir. It's
a lot of CPU for that power.
I know, but when you're looking at like 4.5 watts for a laptop these days, 155 watts is like crazy.
Why'd my battery die in 20 minutes? At least I was able to render 3 videos in that time.
I know, that would be pretty awesome. Other AMD news, apparently Digitime says they're ramping up the shipments of Ryzen 7 and Ryzen 5 CPUs because people are buying them because they are phenomenal power horses. Power horses? They're powerful horses for powerhouses. I like that. Powerhouses.
Yeah.
At a reasonable price. Which Digitimes notes the chip maker should be able to narrow its losses to a mere $50 million for the second quarter of 2017. And actually be profitable by second quarter or third quarter. This is pretty exciting. I mean, we're talking about AMD having like nearly 20% growth. And for those of you who are like, I don't want to talk business, remember, if a business is not profitable, it goes away eventually, and we want AMD to basically be there with a sharp stick, causing Intel to go, well, gosh, we either need to release more powerful processors or we need to reduce the price on the processors we already have. But, July, the VEGA-based GPUs are coming. the rumor from Digitimes is that the Threadripper Ryzen processors will be showing up in July in the X399 chipsets and Ryzen 3 series processors. So this is exciting.
Don't forget that in addition to that Threadripper, which was 16 cores, AMD was also talking about the EPYC. I don't know if we had a thing in the show notes on it, but 32 core part. It's supposed to compete with Xeon server side, so not high end desktop. Even though Threadripper seemed like an insanity for high end desktop as it was. It's like, oh, by the way, there's also one that has double those cores even.
Right.
Meant for server stuff. Pretty cool.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's nice to see this much stuff coming out of AMD because they kind of it's long overdue, right? If anything, just to keep a check on prices of Intel stuff or prices in general in the market on like CPU compute kind of things.
I like it. On the completely unhinged end of GPU computing, a couple days ago, AMD announced the Radeon VEGA Frontier Edition graphics cards. This is like their premium reference GPU, basically, the world's most powerful solution for machine learning and advanced visualization, aimed to empower the next generation of data scientists and visualization professionals. The digital pioneers forging new paths in their fields, designed to handle the most demanding design, rendering, and machine intelligent workloads. This powerful new graphic card excels, machine learning, advanced visualization, VR workloads, and, quote, revolutionize game design workflows. So much like the Threadripper, this is gunning for people who do incredibly complicated, power-intensive stuff on the desktop, and those are supposed to start shipping in late June. But when you look at like the Radeon Fury 10 or the Radeon Fury X, to use simple, easy to digest comparisons, VEGA Frontier Edition should spank it, like 4x memory, like 3x in terms of teraflops and FP16, 1.5 times the performance on FP32. This is I think it's going to be a good year for AMD, from entry level to high end workstation level stuff. 64 compute units. Man, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
It is good stuff. You guys got a chance to talk last night about Ryzen memory latency and how it impacts 1080p gaming. I was just actually, I would say discussing, but it was more of an argument between Robert Heron and I, because I was like, oh, you got to get a Ryzen CPU. But as he pointed out, the new UHD Blu-ray hard drives, which are finally shipping in the U.S. from Pioneer, they're up on Amazon right now for about $135. You actually need the Core i7, the 7th generation Core i7 processors to play back the Ultra HD Blu-ray content. But his other complaint was like, it's all about 1080p gaming performance. And there's some interesting stuff going on under the hood with gaming performance and the AMD Ryzen processors at 1080p. Less of a story when you get above 1080p, when the CPU is not nearly a bottleneck by comparison. What you guys have been going nuts with benchmarks over there, and I say that with love and affection.
Well, I mean, what Ryan wanted to dig into here was, where'd my window go? There it is. What Ryan really wanted to dig into here was just taking a good look at, okay, so we know that there is a latency, I don't want to say issue, but latency works differently on Ryzen, right? Mm-hmm. And we want to try to, compare latency differences just generally speaking. In other words, Ryan took an Intel part and then added some extra timing and, kind of slowed things down on the memory subsystem, at least for, for the Intel side, because we have finer grained ability to monitor like what latency is doing to different applications on the Intel side. There's a thing called VTune, which is a software suite that Intel makes, and Intel CPUs have extra like telemetry kind of stuff baked into the silicon that lets certain pieces of software kind of hook into it, and it's meant for like developers to look at and tune and tweak their software so that it's running faster or whatnot, right? Well, we use that tool. And Ryan went through first some games, and then went through some desktop apps and other things that might typically be used for benchmarking, like Cinebench and Blender and that sort of thing. So by kind of mashing all this together, we were able to compare how much extra latency you would get if you slowed down the memory side of an Intel part versus what the Ryzen CPUs are doing versus the Intel parts. So in other words, if if you had a game that was running particularly slow or noticeably slower on Ryzen than Intel, well, if you took the Intel part and you increased the memory latency of that part, you would start to actually see what the Ryzen CPU was doing, right? You'd actually start it'd start to kind of push in that direction, right? So just kind of backs up further the fact that, like a lot of these initial discrepancies and confusion that you saw out of Ryzen benchmarks initially, especially when it came to gaming, because as it turns out, lots of gaming workloads are very, very memory dependent, which is what the VTune results in the article showed. Memory latency dependent. It's basically just backing it up even further, right? That memory latency matters. And we know that AMD came out and they said, look, we're working with people to optimize and et cetera, but now that kind of actually looks more like AMD's working with developers to try to get their code to be more or less dependent on memory latency, right?
Right.
And part of this is basically because of the Infinity Fabric technology that's in the Ryzen CPUs, the way that those CPUs talk to the memory. There's a fabric. It's another layer of communication, like another layer out, not outside of the CPU as a whole, but between the two separate core complexes, which is called the CCX of the Ryzen CPU. So basically, you have two halves of the cores are kind of split in half in the Ryzen CPU amongst two equal halves, and then they communicate amongst themselves, like across this Infinity Fabric, kind of like a communication bridge between them. But if any of those cores on either side want to talk to the memory, they have to also go through that same fabric. So the latency penalty of hitting that fabric is kind of a catch, at least on the desktop side, and adds some extra latency, regardless of, no matter what. It doesn't matter if you're going from one core to a different one or one core to the memory. It has to go through this fabric to get there, right?
Wow.
At least if the two cores I was talking about are on different complexes, they would have to go across through this fabric. Now, on the flip side, that this fabric thing could potentially benefit AMD once you get to the point of putting a lot more cores in a system, right? So like that Threadripper we were talking about, the EPYC thing, they're also going to use that same Infinity Fabric technology. And I don't think there's really it's basically you can just tack extra things onto the fabric. And as far as I understand it, the latency penalty should still end up being roughly equal. So while it doesn't look great on a desktop part side, which is relatively small number of cores compared to the other products AMD intends to go with, that same technology could, in like a 32 core, part that would compete against Xeons, could actually have overall lower latency on those cores communicating with each other compared to the Intel Xeon systems, which have to go across QPI, which is a different interface on the Intel side, how those cores can talk amongst each other when you have just too many cores to have physically in the same place, right? So it's kind of like you have to lose a little bit to gain some in another place. And I think if AMD can get even a few % of the enterprise market, which is what I think they might actually be going after with this design in the first place, the more I look at it. That extra latency penalty on the desktop side, I don't think they're going to care that much about that, with the added hopes that, that developers will be able to kind of tune their games and make that side of it a little bit less painful, like just on the gaming side, right? But yeah, I think an enterprise side win for them, or at least healthy competition for Intel, would do them a lot of good, and that looks like what they're going for here.
So basically, the mesh is an advantage for really, really complicated high-core situations. It's not so good for simpler 1080p gaming situations, and it's probably going to take AMD reaching out to game developers to deliver better 1080p gaming performance. Is that pretty much what's going on in a nutshell? I mean, can just speeding up, can overclocking your memory fix this, or is this going to be purely the developers have to do some serious work on the code?
Yeah, that's been separate stuff that a lot of people have been talking about, and Ryan's done some testing on too. I'm not sure how much we've written on that part, but yeah, overclocking. Oh, since the Infinity Fabric runs at half of the memory clock rate,
right?
Your RAM clock rate in Ryzen systems. Yeah, if you can get away with overclocking, even like, if you can get your clock rate higher, even if your RAM is not necessarily able to be pushed that far, it probably could be if you were able to also increase the timings to compensate, so that the RAM is still allowed to take the same amount of time to do a thing, but when it actually communicates, it's communicating at a higher clock rate, right? And that will end up causing the Infinity Fabric to scale up too, which actually helps the problem, considerably. Depending on how high you can push that Infinity Fabric clock. Right. And I'm not sure why they decided to go with half the clock rate. Why the design decision would have been to do that. It might be that you have to keep the clock rate lower on the Fabric in order for it to be able to span out to longer distances when you do get to the EPYC processor and the Threadripper and whatnot. But it would have been nice to see them be able to just have that 1/2 multiplier thing go away,
right?
On the desktop parts, since the Fabric is relatively so small and it's only going between two complexes, and so many folks are basically almost doubling that number by changing their timings on their memory side. If AMD was able to just ship it with it, the Fabric going faster and the memory still going the standard speeds, potentially could have, made things better for them and less confusing for people trying to review it and figure out what the heck was making it tick and making it slower where we didn't think it should have been slower, right?
So basically, get a bigger monitor and increase your memory frequency. Yeah.
I mean,
or a higher resolution, I should say. A 65-inch 1080p monitor is going to perform the same as a 44-inch or a 27-inch or a 23-inch 1080p
That's
monitor.
True.
But going
That's
to
true.
A 4K monitor or something higher resolution than 1080p will kind of eliminate this. I mean, it's kind of fascinating, right? Going from 1515, 1536 1T to 1616, 1639 1T. You're looking at like a 10% or 11% performance boost. Which, quote, still leaves Ryzen at a 3.2x disadvantage over the faster settings on the Intel Core i7 7700K. So, all right, you know what? I can live with this. I'm gaming on a higher resolution monitor, so it's a good read, though. PCPro.com, Ryzen memory latencies impact weak 1080p gaming. Timings is the link to that one. Moving in a completely different direction, Google I/O this week, and of course, because Google was talking about things at Google I/O, Amazon had to announce a few products. They did a big refresh on the Fire tablets, updated versions of the Fire 7 and the Fire HD 8. Those can be pre-ordered now, shipping in June. You're talking about like $50 for a Fire 7, $80 for a Fire HD 8. Fire 7's a little thinner and lighter. It's like 9.6 millimeters thick, down from 10.6 millimeters. They dropped like a half an ounce off of the weight, and they're going to deliver their promise in 8 hours per charge instead of 7. Dual Wi-Fi band support. Big thing though, the Fire 7 display is supposed to have sharper text and higher contrast, which would be good because the Fire 7 display is not my favorite thing for reading text on. This is for $50, when you're looking at it like a sub $100 tablet, the most obvious place they saved money above and beyond the kind of general fit and finish is the quality of the screen. It's a 1024 by 600 screen, so you're not talking about something that's particularly spectacular. Pretty much the same processor, the same 1 gigabyte of RAM, and the oh-so Amazon lifestyle you get with the version of Android that shows up on that. So, decent for a $50 tablet. You're going to notice a big difference when you go to a more expensive tablet in terms of the monitor on that one. They have new colors for the Fire HD. The the biggest difference between the Fire HD and the Fire 7 are really that you're getting a 1280 by 800 8-inch display that's a little bit sharper. You get a gig and a half of RAM and up to 12 hours of battery life and a whole bunch more storage. So update to the kids edition of the Fire 7. But I think the big news, though, is that shipping in June are 4K TVs running Amazon's software, and they are really inexpensive. They're on pre-order at Amazon right now. Robert Heron, we're talking about this on AVXL this week. Entry-level 43-inch 4K Ultra HD Smart LED TV, the Amazon Fire TV edition, that's starting at $449.99. That's going to be shipped on June 14th. Another $100 takes you up to 50-inch. Another $100 takes you up to 55-inch. No current pricing on the 65-inch version. When you're looking at these, think of these as, I am a big fan of Amazon Fire TV. I'm a big fan of ALEXA to control things around the house. These are basically 1080p TVs that happen to have 8 million pixels. You are not looking at any kind of HDR support. You are not looking at not really having the light to support the HDR, the full HD. It's just they are not going to deliver HDR, and they are not going to deliver great HDR. Almost any television in this price category that claims to be HDR compliant, it's just generally the screen won't deliver it. I was kind of excited that Universal Search on Fire TV is now up to 140 channels, including Netflix, Hulu, HBO Now, Showtime, Starz, Prime Video. It's an interesting option, and obviously a sign that Amazon is ready to compete with Roku. At the same time, they seem to be burying the hatchet with Apple over the Apple TV. So interesting option. Think of it as a 1080p TV with a lot of pixels. So something to think about on that one. Google Home, or I should say Google I/O. One of the big stories at Google I/O: 2 billion active Android devices worldwide. Active.
Pretty impressive.
That's just, that was pretty much my reaction. Someday they will all be on, I can't even be mean. This is, they were at 1.4 billion active users in 2015. I would like to see more of them in later and more updated versions of the operating system from a security standpoint. But that was one of the big stories at Google I/O, is that they're working to make Google Play Store and offer significantly improved security for Android users. Something they showed a prototype of, the Instant On standalone VR headset. That's going to be interesting to take a look at. Yeah. It's essentially, there's a great article on backchannel.com, Inside Google's Slow-Mo VR Moonshot. And this is this crazy blue-looking headset prototype. Google and Qualcomm are working together to create a reference design for a standalone Daydream VR headset using the Snapdragon 835. And by the end of 2017. So essentially the guts of a smartphone in a headset, so that you do not have to attach your headset to a $1,200 or $1,000 worth of PC to give you a really badass VR tool. This is pretty cool, because it should be, in theory, it should work a lot better than phones being stuffed into a headset holder. They can basically run the chip at a higher level because they won't have the same thermal limits, so they'll get better clocks on the GPU and the system on a chip. You can put a larger battery on a headset design like that. I'm really curious to see what that turns out to be and what the pricing on that. So, we wait with bated breath. This is a prototype. These hopefully will ship by the holiday shopping season at the end of the year. Other big announcement: 9to5 Google has a good summary of Google Home, adding hands-free calling, proactive assistance, and Bluetooth streaming. So the little box that wants to be Amazon's Echo except Google, is going to be doing things like warning you when there's a traffic jam on your commute, giving you reminders, giving you heads up on flight changes, doing hands-free calling. So, hey, Google, call whoever, and basically sets up as a standard phone call. They're going to be adding their free music tier to Google Home. SoundCloud and Deezer are supporting Home, streaming music from Android or iPhone via Bluetooth. Apparently HBO Now, Hulu, and a bunch of others are going to be adding support for sending to TV. It's exciting. It's exciting. I'm really curious to watch because Google's obviously playing catch up with Amazon and the Echo as hard and as fast as they can. So, Samsung S8 and S8 Plus are getting Daydream support this summer. That'll be cool. Daydream VR at this point is a year old, which is kind of mind-blowing to think about. But Samsung S8, S8 Plus, LG's next flagship device, will support Daydream, writes Nat Guerin over at The Verge. And it'll be a software update over the air coming out this summer. So that's a big plus. The other thing is one of the questions we've been asking over the past few weeks with the launch of the S8 and the S8 Plus is Samsung going to be able to sort of recover from the S7 debacle? Or I should probably get very specific. The Samsung S7 Note debacle, lest I get harangued on Twitter. The Samsung Galaxy Note 7 exploding batteries. And I think the answer is, Galaxy S8, S8 Plus sales do not look like they were particularly brutally impacted by the Galaxy Note 7, flaming phone issues, because they've sold more than 5 million less than a month after launching. And that's even without expanded availability. Cho Moo-hyun was writing up on ZDNet. More than 5 million globally, less than a month after the launch. And that's pretty much just launching in South Korea, the U.S., and Canada on April 21st, and then adding the U.K., France, Germany, and Italy a week after that. Apparently they had 1 million pre-orders in South Korea alone. And by the end of this month, will be available in over 120 countries and China. And that's going to be interesting to see how well they do in China, because Chinese Chinese smartphone manufacturers have really, really beat up Samsung inside of China in the last couple of years. So Bixby remains kind of weak. The red tinted displays that some users had reported in the early phones have been repaired via a software update. So, congratulations, Samsung. It looks like they are recovering quite nicely from the Note 7. So, you go, Samsung. You go. OpenCL's merging their roadmap into Vulkan. Are you excited about this one? Scott's got a great write-up on PC Per on this one. Do you feel like this is the future?
Well, it's nice to see that once Vulkan was kind of standing on its own before. So right. if you're gonna kind of merge it into I don't want to call it a better known name, but a name that's associated with more things currently, right? That would help spread the tech, basically, right? Potentially just open up more things, more abilities to use hardware that can benefit from Vulkan. Even if that hardware can, Vulkan optimized hardware, if you will, right? Like, in other words, AMD hardware. It'll definitely probably help them. Yeah, I mean, it's progress, man. Like, progress is good.
There you have it. Progress is good, ladies and gentlemen. Larger hard drives are better, and helium is best at all with a rotating hard drive technology. Man, sorry.
I'm
just dreaming of 10 gigabyte hard drives.
That was actually, or 10 terabytes. Is that? Do you have that in the notes? I forget.
I did not. Somebody told me about that very, very late.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Western Digital launched, Red and Red Pro in 10 terabytes, which we were kind of expecting, right? Because there was already
Do I even
Western
want to know
Digital
what those are
Gold.
going to cost?
Right. I think it's $494 for the Red and $522 or so for the Red Pro. Which is a little higher than you might expect if you just did like cost per terabyte calculations compared to like an 8 terabyte Red and Red Pro. But the MSRPs usually are a little bit high compared to what the market settles out at. Like typically hard drive market prices will just drive towards almost equaling out in the cost per terabyte across almost all of the capacities in the line. You might pay a few more bucks for the the flagship capacity compared to the rest, but it used to not be the case, right? Hard drives used to be,
right.
The flagship capacity was like, oh my goodness, you were paying 20 or 30% more for the amount of storage space you were getting. Nowadays, it's pretty much linear. Once it settles out in the market. $533 for the Red Pro, not $522.
Yeah, well, the WD Red 8 terabyte is currently selling for $265.51 on Amazon. They're out of stock. Coming back in later this week. That's on a list price of $400. The 10 terabyte drives, which are temporarily out of stock with no restocking date listed, the list price is $798.30, and the street price on Amazon is $365.19.
I mean, the Reds, the 8 terabyte Reds, when they've been shipping, it's typically been like somewhere around $300 lately. I mean, I know you saw a much lower price, but I don't think that's what they're normally going for lately.
That's real.
But they tend to be around 300, maybe a little bit less.
Order it now.
Well, yeah. So if you took the 300 and you scaled it up to 10 terabytes, that gives you 375. So I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if like 400 is for each is what the 10 terabyte Red would settle out to. Pretty darn good. We were talking about this on the podcast last night, and we were like, why would you need something that big? And my counter was, well, you can get away with just a 2-bay NAS. Right, and just buy 2 of these, and you're duplicating everything, you're mirroring, so you're kind of throwing away one drive worth of space, but hey, it's mirrored.
Right.
Like, so if the drive fails, you didn't just lose everything, and you're saving yourself probably around $400 in data recovery, if not more. So right, it kind of helps you out there a little bit, but just remember, RAID's not a backup. So don't just buy 2, buy 4 and have 2 NASs.
I was giggling because I was looking at my Drobo 5D. Drobo has been a sponsor on This Week in Computer Hardware. This is not an ad. But I was sitting there and I was looking at it. I'm like, the capacity seems kind of high because I've got a weird collection of 3 terabyte, 4 terabyte, and then 1 2 terabyte drive on it. And I realized that I had not turned on dual disk redundancy, which of course takes you from basically I have 15 gigabytes of drives, which gives me 9.98 terabytes of storage capacity or 9.98 terabytes available for data. But that's will only recover from a single drive loss. So if I go into full paranoid mode and go to dual disk redundancy, i.e. I can lose 2 drives before everything falls apart, that takes me down to 7.26 terabytes of data, which is a little low. In part because I only have, I've got that 1 2 terabyte drive in there, which kind of messes everything up. But I was laughing. I was going to ask, on the Drobos you've been using, are you running with dual disk redundancy, or are you just letting it all hang out and going with single disk redundancy?
With single? I have a Drobo Pro that I use as a backup. And because it's a backup, combined with the fact that it has drives that are smaller capacity each than what's in the main array that is backing up to it, I just go single, because it's a backup, right? So it's like it's the second copy already. The sole purpose of that backup would be to copy the stuff back off and get it onto the main array like immediately if I needed to use the backup. So in that case, I'm not that worried about failures happening over time and such. I'm okay with just 1 disk there. But it's another duplicate copy of all the stuff. So you can get away with like a couple of RAID 5s, even if you're going to have 2 of them, right? You have an extra layer of redundancy there in the fact of another entire copy of all your stuff, which is
copy that
the way you probably want to go. Yeah.
There are worse things. than having more redundancy.
Yeah.
Oh, man. GTX 1030, as Jeremy writes up on PCPer, quietly launched from a variety of vendors late yesterday amidst the tsunami of AMD announcements. Basically, it's very similar to AMD's Radeon RX 550. The idea is that, it's better than integrated graphics on your motherboard. NVIDIA's claiming it's a wee tiny card. It's low profile. They're claiming it offers twice the performance of the iGPU found in Intel Core i5 processors, and in many cases is passively cooled. So, it's more of a home theater PC. I need something better than the graphics on my computer, but I don't want to spend real money to get a talented gaming GPU. Or I'm running games that are so old I really don't need that much in terms of 3D performance. But you're looking at like $75 or $85. I do like the fact that a lot of them are passively cooled, although some of the heat sinks on them are kind of crazy. The HDMI 2.0B, they even offer a DVI slot along with the HDMI and Zotac offering. MSI went kind of crazy. They dropped a half dozen models. One's actively cooled, for example, that'll run up to like a 1,518 megahertz boost clock. The passively cooled one does not have a fan, but is going to take up additional slots in your motherboard because it has a massive passive cooler available on it. Similar stories from Gigabyte, where they do a low-profile 2G and a silent low-profile 2G model. In those cases, they offer an overclock mode and a gaming mode, which takes you from like 1252 megahertz to gaming mode runs you at 1227 megahertz and a 1468 megahertz boost, and then an overclocking mode it takes you to an even higher 1506 megahertz with a base clock of 1252 megahertz. But again, like the other ones, you either get a smaller, more compact, more slot-saving, friendly fan version, or a passively cooled version with a massive heatsink on it. So, more of a home theater PC, or my old GPU died and I just need something to connect it to a television kind of option, more so than an actual genuine, like, I'm going to do some serious gaming on this. Or at least it will make gaming suck less on your aging Core i5 system. Something that would be a much better pick for 1080p gaming if you're looking for a tiny GPU is Inno3D's got a single slot GTX 1050 Ti. If you don't need single slot, this isn't, this is going to be more expensive, most likely than a 1050 Ti, a standard 1050 Ti. But I thought it was really cool that they have like a tiny, or I should say a narrow single slot GTX 1050 Ti GPU. If you're not familiar with Inno3D, they're out of Hong Kong, one slot edition. Inno3D GeForce GTX 1050 Ti one slot edition, and it's basically a reference clock, 4 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, and a shrouded single fan cooler, and a stylish red and black packaging. So HDMI 2.0, DisplayPort 1.4, DVI-D. It's a little, it's an unusual design, but if you don't have a lot of space inside your case, this is definitely an option for you. It's fun. It's fun. I like when they get decent GPUs in really tiny packages. So, I gotta ask, what's your primary keyboard these days?
Just one of the Corsair Gaming, like K70 or something. One of the RGB ones.
I feel like Jeremy was trolling me when he posted about the Hazio MK Retro, because the title's IBM Model M. Get an Underwood-based keyboard if you want to impress. And as somebody who's got a box right over here to my right with 3 spare IBM Model M's in it, I was laughing. If you haven't seen this thing, it's kind of crazy. It looks. We've seen a bunch of keyboards with keys based on old school mechanical typewriters that have shown up on Etsy or occasionally on Amazon that were staggeringly expensive. This one, the Hazio MK Retro, big raised circular keys using Hazio's OARMI olive switches. If you want a staggeringly LED-free keyboard, or at least RGB-free keyboard, which is getting more and more difficult to do even with inexpensive gaming keyboards. I mean, I took a look on, we did a short, TechThing short on Aukey's new $65 mechanical keyboard, which has blue switches and a whole lot of shiny colors coming up there. This is strange and slightly wonderful, and something worth considering if you want to feel staggeringly unique about your keyboard. 'Cause I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of these floating around the universe. I would be very curious to see what the actual typing experience is like on it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Having recently, we pulled out my grandmother's old mechanical keyboard for the boys to play with. And if an IBM Selectric is a pretty badass typing machine. A mid-1940s portable mechanical machine is an exercise in suffering.
It's true.
If you've never used one, you're looking at like on this particular, I think it's a Remington. There's like almost an inch and a half to 2 inches of key travel. So if you're looking for something a little crazy, take a look at Osio Corp's latest. So, benchmarking, anything exciting you can talk about, or is it all top secret this week?
Yeah, I'm working on a few top secret things. Yeah.
That's all he.
That's all I can say,
ladies. That's all I can say.
Sorry.
Where do they keep the nuclear vessels? That's all I can say. With that,
yeah.
Oh my goodness. We did a whole bunch of conversation on Tech Thing this week, talking about the WannaCry ransomware and what you can actually do to fight ransomware. And if you're curious about another thing we did recently on Tech Thing is I took a look at Puro's BT5200. They're studio grade adult headphones that are designed like the Puro children's headphones. These are designed for adults, so you actually they don't cap you at 85 dB. They tell you when you're at 85 dB and when you've gone over 85 dB, or when you're going to be deaf in 45 minutes range. If you're looking for a way to save your kids' ears or your adults' ears, you can find that video up on youtube.com/techthing. So PCPro.com, ladies and gentlemen, is the place to find Mr. Alan Malventano's work. I suspect there will be some exciting new storage posts in the near future, and I suspect there will be some exciting new AMD GPU posts in the near future. Not that Alan or Ryan could talk about those. Ryan, we expect to be back next week. He's currently at Disneyland, and of course, you can find me at techthing.com or avxcel.com. At Alan Malventano is the place to tweet at Alan, and I highly recommend you ping him on the Twitters if you've got a storage question, because he has all of the answers, and if he doesn't, he knows how to find all of the answers, which makes him amazing. It's just Malventano, no Alan. At Malventano. I can type it without thinking about it, but apparently I can't say it without thinking about it. At Malventano. Twitter.com/Malventano. Someday I'll get it right. As always, you can find all the older episodes of This Week in Computer Hardware at twit.tv/Twitch. And if you're new, you can find out how to subscribe and join us each and every week. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
And we'll catch you next week on Twitch.